We just want to welcome you to Amplify Online, actually, extra special. So yeah, we just want you to feel free and feel like this is a place to enter in with your Father, to just be with Him and to have communication with Him, just talk to Him. Yeah, we just want to emphasize how worship is just talking and saying thank you to the God of the universe for all that He's done for you and for me. Yeah. So I encourage you, if you have anything good that's happened to you recently, or if you just want to say thank you, or yeah, you just want to talk to your dad, worship is a great way to do that. So yeah, let's just take a second and focus in on Him. Shakes the mountain tops. The only word that breaks the curse is your name, the one that covers all. It's higher than the others, higher than the others. His name that shakes the mountain top, Jesus. The only name that breaks the curses off. Your name, the one that covers all. It's higher than the others, higher than the others. Full of faith and wonder, I will say, no, I just want to say yes when it doesn't make sense, Father God. We just want to say yes to your purpose, Father God. So right now we declare wherever we're at, if we're sitting on our couches, if we're sitting on our floors, Father God, if we're sitting on our bed right now, we just say yes to you and your purpose and your promise for our lives, Father God, because it is so good. It is so good. It surpasses our understanding, Father God. We're just so thankful to have a Father who looks out for us and wants what's best for us, Father. So we thank you for that. We love you, and we thank you that there's even more to come tonight. So we're excited for what you have in store in Jesus' name.
Hey guys, welcome back to Amplified. Hope you all have had a great week this week. We're back online and we're here for another service on Friday. My message today is called Mission. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but quarantine has been teaching us a lot about people. There's a lot of different things that it's been teaching us, but specifically, have you noticed how many apps we use now to video chat with people? Like there's Zoom, there's House Party, there's WhatsApp, there's FaceTime, there's Facebook Messenger, there's all these different apps that basically do the exact same thing. And like I'm telling you, 90% of the people that I have on one platform, they're the exact same people I have on another platform. So I don't know why we need like 10 different apps to do the exact same thing. And like I get it, some of them are better for calls and for chatting, and other ones are better for, like, I don't know, if you're doing a Bible study or if you're doing like school or whatever, but there has to be some overlap going on in this area. It can't be possible that we need 10 apps to video chat with people. And I don't know, there has to be something else going on here. And there's another side of it too that I've noticed during quarantine, is that at the very beginning, it was mainly the extroverts that were complaining, right? So like when everybody was like, okay, you have to quarantine, you have to stay home, all the introverts were secretly like, okay, all right, let's do this, right? But the extroverts immediately, they're thinking like, I need to go out, I need to go talk to people, like how am I gonna interact with the world? Like I need to be out there. And so for the extroverts, they're already thinking, okay, this sucks. And then slowly over time, eventually the ambiverts, like in between extrovert and introvert extremes, there's the ambiverts. Those people eventually got on board and they're like, yeah, this is like, it's a month now. It's kind of getting to be a little bit too long. And then eventually we got to the point where even introverts, when you looked at them, they're pulling up to parking lots, like talking to their friends, like outside the window, shouting at each other, or like hanging out in their trunks, looking at each other just from like trunk to trunk, or you just find people out in the field 10 feet apart from each other, hanging out. Like, it's funny and it's kind of crazy, but we as people, somehow, some way, through video, through in person, through one way or another, we just felt like we had to get closer to people. And I was thinking about it, and these are just a couple of examples, but you realized how people and humanity in general, we just have this feeling and this internal sense that we have to belong to something. That to the point where sometimes we just spend time with people and groups we really have nothing in common with, but we just really want to be a part of something. And so we just go along with it anyways. And sometimes it's a group, it's like a team, it's a group chat, whatever it is, but it's crazy how much we really want to belong with people. And we want to belong to something. And I think it has to do with the reality that we as humans, we were created with this reason to live. And if you didn't know this, you and I, we were both created, and every one of us watching, and everyone was, even those who weren't watching, we were created with a reason to live. And when we can't figure out what that reason is, we usually just end up making up that reason for ourselves. And so we were all created and designed to live and to have mission in our life. And we're designed to answer that question that God placed within our hearts, which is, why do I exist? And if that question gets away from us and it gets too hard, like, we find a way to make that make sense, and we make it up for ourselves. And that's why it's so easy to get somebody to join us on our mission, even though it seems like it's crazy or it doesn't make sense, because other people, they're also on a mission, on a quest to answer those life questions for why they exist as well. And so I know every single one of us have that question inside of us, which is, why do we exist? And what are you here for? And I want you to know, and I want to remind you that God created you for that question. He placed it within you, and he created you to have that question within you. So don't feel like it's something you've got to get out of you, or you've got to get rid of, or it's something you've got to leave behind, or you have that question of, why do I exist and why am I here? Because you were created with a reason to live. You're created with a mission, and God placed that within your heart. That's why it's in there. And so it's not something to ignore and to push aside. It's something to engage and to embrace. And so I just want to remind you today, you and I, we were created for mission. And the world we live in, I don't know if we always realize this, but it's shaped and it's curated by people who live on mission, even in the world. The people who are clear about the mission in their lives are the ones who are shaping the everyday lives that we see and that we live in. Think about this. How many of you have a phone? I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have a phone, right? A lot of you are watching this message on your phone. And think about it. I looked this up. 55% of people in North America have an iPhone. 55% of people with a smartphone have an iPhone. And if you're watching this, that basically means if you're watching this and you don't have an iPhone, then the next person who's watching has an iPhone. And then if you don't have an iPhone, and you're in North America, you definitely have a smartphone. Like, it might not be the best phone, or you might not think it's the greatest phone or the latest or whatever it is, but you have a smartphone of some sort. And we don't even realize this sometimes, but we're actually living out the mission that other people have created and have wanted for us to live out. Because, okay, think about this. What's the first site? And we've used this example before. What's the first site you think of when you think about searching something up? It's not like you tell your buddy, okay, can you Microsoft Bing this thing for me? That's not what we say. We don't even say, can you search this up for me? Like, sometimes we do, but really the phrase that we use most of the time is we say, just Google it. Just search it. Like, we don't just search it up on Google. We say Google it to the point where that's the search engine. We don't think about anything else. We just think of Google. And it's not an accident that we think about that. These people who work at Google, they've wanted that. They've planned for this. They've created their websites and everything, their products and their services and everything that they do in such a way to make it as easy as possible for us to think of that name when we think of searching something, to think of that name when we think of like a phone or a car, or when we think of high tech. We just think of Google in this sense because they've planned for this and they had a really clear mission for their company and how they wanted it to be portrayed and lived out in society. And so you think about it. Have you ever met somebody who was living their life on mission, where basically everything that they do is about their mission, and every conversation that they have is about their mission? And what they're doing in school, or what they're studying, or what they watch on TV, or like the friends that they have, and everything that happens in their lives, it seems to be all centrally surrounded and behind this one theme that is the mission of their life. And everything they do is just linked to that. It seems kind of crazy, and it seems a little bit out there, like it's so excessive sometimes, but I feel like we just think it's crazy because we look at it and we realize we might not fully realize it, but we have this understanding that that's who we could be if we lived out that our lives with that level of mission, with that level of purpose. And when you clarify your mission in your life, it begins to clarify everything. Because we think about reading books and looking at TV shows and finding all these different sources of information to try and fix our finances, our relationships, our just everything that's going on in our lives, like our future, how to get a job, all these things, the issues that we have, the things that we struggle with, we try and fix them, but we realize we start to realize that when you live a life of mission, it actually clarifies a lot of those things. They start to line up, and you start to make those decisions without even really having to decide, like, okay, I don't want to do this and I want to do this. Instead, that mission becomes our purpose and our life and why we live. And so instead of deciding, I need to do this or I don't need to do this, it becomes ingrained in who we are, and we instinctively make the choices that we need to make to live that out in our lives. And it's not a coincidence. Proverbs 29:18 says, where there is no vision, the people perish. The amazing thing about Jesus, he was a man who lived his life on mission, about as on mission as anybody could ever be, because he was 12 years old when this started. Well, when we get a glimpse of how that started, right? It actually started from his birth, before he even really had control. Born of a virgin, born in like unlikely circumstances, guy trying to kill him, escaping to Egypt with his family. Like, Jesus's whole life has been on mission, but like the first example we see of him actively choosing it is when he was 12 years old in the temple, and he's talking to these priests and the people around, and they're all wowed and they're amazed. Like, who is this child? He's talking about God. He's talking about the scriptures with such knowledge, with such wisdom. They were so amazed. They're like, what's going on? This is crazy. We've never seen this before. And he was already living his life on mission, talking about his Father, who is God in heaven, with the people around him at 12 years old. And then, we see him later on. There's a story. It's in Matthew chapter 3, verse 13. If you have your Bible, you can go there. Matthew chapter 3, verse 13. It reads, Then Jesus went from Galilee to the Jordan River to be baptized by John. But John tried to talk him out of it. I am the one who needs to be baptized by you, he said. So why are you coming to me? But Jesus said, it should be done, for we must carry out all that God requires. So John agreed to baptize him. And after his baptism, as Jesus came up out of the water, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and settling on him. And a voice from heaven said, This is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. If you were the Son of God in that moment, okay, just take a moment to think about that. Imagine being Jesus and being baptized by John in that moment. How would you have handled that situation? Like, what would you have thought of being baptized by someone when you're supposed to be the creator of the universe, when you're supposed to be God, when you're the creator of that creation, of that person who's supposed to be baptizing you? Like, you might be thinking, I'm God, right? I shouldn't be baptized by this locust eating, living in the wild, random dude. Like, I'm beyond that. But when you look at Jesus and the life that he lived a life on mission, to the point where he could look at that situation and understand that he was there to serve and not to be served. So he could look at John and he could see that that was his mission, that was his purpose, to live that out. And it got to the point in the next chapter where he goes into the wilderness. Jesus goes into the wilderness and he fasts for 40 days and 40 nights. Like, why? He's God. Do you really have to do this? And then he faced temptation from the devil. He could have, skipped through all that. He could have been, calling on God, like, God, get me out of the situation, give me some AC, get me some food, like, or get me back into a position where I don't need to hunger and thirst like a human being. Like, I'm a God. Like, what am I doing here? But that's not what he did. He lived that out. He went through that because he was living his life on mission. And then, afterwards, the miracles in his ministry started to take place, and we saw him do a lot of these crazy miracles. We saw him heal the sick. We saw him share the love of God with people, share the good news, and tell the world why he had come. He started to do all this, but it started with him living on mission from the very beginning. And then the Spirit of God descended on him like a dove, and then he went out and started to do all these things. Like, that's why he was able to go out and to die and to rise again from the dead. And he saw it as something he was called to do, because when we live a life of mission, we see the power of God move in us in ways we never could have imagined. It's in ways that we never could have seen. And it's because we're living out the life that God intended for us to live. It's because we're living out that life and we're answering that question that God placed inside of our hearts and inside of our beings of, who am I and what was I created to live? Like, what is my purpose here on this earth? And if that's the case, you might be wondering, how do I know what is that mission for me? Okay, like, Jesus lived his life on mission, but what is that mission for me? What is that mission for you? You might be wondering for yourself today, like, what is that mission for me? How am I supposed to live that out? How am I supposed to know? And I want us to go to this passage. It's in Matthew chapter 28, verse 18. It's not enough to just have any old mission that you try and live out as if we're some random company trying to accomplish the goals of getting more dollars, or trying to get more shareholders, or whatever it is. Like, we need to live out the mission that God has for us, to actually answer that question that lives within our souls, that lives within our beings of, why am I here? What is my purpose here? What am I called to do? And in Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, this is some of the last instructions that Jesus gives his disciples. So Jesus comes and he lives this perfect, blameless life. He comes and he dies and he rises again, and he first took on all his sickness, and then he died and he rose again, and he comes to his disciples. And you've got to imagine that if this is one of the last things that he's telling his disciples, this is something really, really important that they have to embrace and internalize, right? And this is what he tells them. Jesus came and told his disciples in verse 18, I've been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I've given you, and be sure of this, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. That's what you and I were called to live. That's the thing that Jesus called us to do and to live out, is to go out and to share the good news that Jesus came. God loved us so much that he came in the form of Jesus. He sent his son, and he died and he rose again for you and for me. And he paid the price of sin because we would never measure up, because we would never be good enough. He paid that price so that we would never have to die an eternal death, but that we could actually have God living and alive within us. And that's why Amplified exists. That's why the church exists. That's why we're here today. That's why we can still call on you and ask you to ask God and really see and ask him about how he's calling you to serve and to reach his people, because that's the Great Commission. That's the greatest thing that we could ever do, is to fulfill the mission that Jesus called us to live, and that's to go into the world and to make disciples of all the nations and to baptize them and to teach them. That's who Jesus called us to be, and that's what we were called to do. So that's why we push you to grow and to learn to embrace God's call on your life. And that's what we were all called to do. That's our mission. That's why our vision at Amplified is to love God, to love people, and to serve people, because that's the mission that God has placed on us. That's the mission that Jesus spoke in these verses. And that's what we believe, that as a church, we actually have to live that out, and that we have to go into the world. We have to share the good news that Jesus came for you. He came to answer the questions within your heart. That's why Jesus came, and that's why everybody serves. That's why there's people at Amplified who spend time during quarantine to make sure that you are fed, to make sure that you have a Bible study, to make sure that you have social media, to make sure that they share what God is speaking to them in their hearts. That, like, this is the mission that God placed in our hearts. And I want to encourage you, when you find that and when you interact with that mission and when you talk to him about it, he's going to make things happen that you never knew were possible, that you never could have imagined, that stuff that you hear people talk about and that you see maybe through videos and that you hear stories about, but you've never actually lived, or you've only had that happen maybe once or twice. But when we embrace that mission, our life becomes a miraculous, fruitful walk. And it's funny because so many of us are chasing miracles. So many of us are chasing all these stuff and all these like effects of what happens after we know God. But when we seek God and when we embrace the mission that he places on our hearts, miracles are not the things that we seek. They're the fruit of our lives. They're the things that come out of knowing God and seeking him and having a relationship with him. And so I love this analogy of wind. When you think of wind, sometimes it can be annoying, but it's actually really cool because you can't actually physically see wind. You only see the effects of wind when it's blowing and you see the branches blowing and you see the grass moving, you see the leaves on the trees, you feel your car when you're driving shift to the left or to the right. You feel and you see the effects of the wind, but you don't actually see the wind. What you do see is the power of the wind impacting those trees, impacting the grass, impacting the vehicles, impacting everything around us. And so when we live a life of mission, we see the power of God. We might not necessarily physically see God, but we can see his power move in ways we didn't know were possible. But because of the power of God, we see him moving in and through us. And I want to ask you today a simple question. Are you living a life that's on mission? And if not, will you join in seeking God and asking him, how do I live out this call that you've placed in my heart, God? And sharing the good news that you've placed in my life and good news that you've brought onto the world and that you wanted us to give back to the world. This love that you spread everywhere around. God, like, how are you calling me to be a part of that mission? And when you ask him, he'll put something on your heart. I just say, you might not know what it feels like to speak to God and to have him answer you, but just go on your knees and try. And I guarantee you, when you humble yourself, and when you put yourself before God and you put yourself in a position to trust Him and to see Him move through you, then we can see His power come to life and His mission come to life in our lives. And I really want to challenge you, don't be a person who just attends a church. Don't be a person who just shows up to the basic minimum aspects of what it takes to be part of a religion, because God called us to have a relationship with Him. And it's God who gives us that mission. It's not the mission that gives us the power of God, but it's God who gives us the mission. And it's Him who gives us the power to fulfill that mission. And it's Him who gives us the gifts that come to life to touch people's lives so that they'll know the love of God is alive and well in this place, and in that place, and in that place, and in your workplace, and in your cars, and in your homes, and in your schools, and with your friends, that He can be alive all around us, that God is calling me and you to be purposeful in living on mission. So let's be people who can live that out. And I want us to take a moment and let's all bow our heads and close our eyes, because some of you might be here and you're saying, yeah, like I've seen God move in certain ways, but it's only in limited capacities, or it's only in certain moments. And there's some of you who are saying, yeah, like I've seen it happen once or twice. Or there's some of you who are here and you're saying, I've never seen it at all. And I want to encourage you. First, it comes with knowing God and having a relationship with Him. Like those disciples did, they knew Jesus, they sat with Him, they talked with Him. So when He gave him that call of the mission, it was like hearing the voice from someone that they knew, that they had a relationship with. So they could embrace that. And then when they embraced that mission, they lived their lives, and they also lived as Jesus lived, going out and having miracles and signs and wonders, and people's lives impacted, and the love of God coming alive through their life. And it happened because it started with them knowing and having a conversation with Him, and then seeking Him to say, God, how are my gifts going to be used for you? And so let's bow our heads and let's close our eyes and say, God, I'm giving myself to you in this moment. I'm giving you permission to speak to me and to allow your mission to come alive in my life today. And I guarantee you, as you speak to Him, God's going to put an area on your heart. And even if you're not sure what that area looks like, and even if that area doesn't be your lifelong journey, it's going to be your starting point. It's going to be an area that God uses you to plant something within your heart and to see His power move in your life. So take like another couple seconds here. Let Him know, God, I give you permission to speak to me in this moment. And you might also be here today and you're thinking, I've never even had a relationship with God. I've never had this conversation, or I don't really know what this is all about. And it says in Romans 10 that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is God and you believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, that you will be saved. And so I'm going to lead you in a prayer, and you could just repeat the words after me. Now, this is a prayer that invites Jesus into your life and allows Him to answer those questions within your heart, allows Him to be the one who leads your life, who leads you into a life that's meaningful and purposeful, and that answers that question that's within you. And so if you've prayed this prayer before, let's just pray it together, because that's the call of our life. And let's support the people who are praying this for the first time. And so you can repeat after me. Dear Jesus, I give you my life. I believe that you are God, and I believe that you rose again from the dead. I ask you right now to come into my life. And I ask you to give me boldness, confidence to live for you every day. In Jesus' name, amen. If you prayed that prayer for the first time, please talk to us on our social media. You can just message us directly there, and we have people who are more than happy and excited to share in this new journey with you. And if you have any prayer requests or stuff that's on your heart, I encourage you also message them to us. We want to pray with you. We want to support you. Even though we can't be together physically, we can also pray during this time and support one another. So thank you guys, and have a blessed week. We'll see you guys next week.